Hey there, sinners. It's Adam Knox, and today I want to try something different. So, in this segment, we usually do reviews on single kind of products, but given the time of the year it is, I wanted to do a little bit of a different experiment and basically share with you over a couple of series some of my recommended reading pieces for specific aspects of your psychology. So today we're going to hit actually the psychology of a magician, and these would be those unconventional books that don't usually fall in the area of occultism, but will be essential in you helping to understand the inner game of the occult. Let's get into it. So my first book is called Inner Work, Using Dreams and Active Imagination for Personal Growth by Robert A. Johnson. He was also the author of He and She and several other great pieces. Now, Robert was a Jungian analyst along with a couple of other disciplines that he also combined inside of his work. What makes his piece so essential, and it's one of my cornerstones, like one of those essentials, if you're truly serious about this path, it's something that you really need to be familiar with, and that is the subject of active imagination and the unconscious. In fact, depending on when you watch it, there'll be an episode out where I discuss this subject in particular detail. This work really helps us to understand dreams, how to interpretate our dreams, and how to really get started in the practice of active imagination. He takes us through several essential stages, from beginning to moving that into that kind of barter deal process to really developing that. He gives very interesting stories of people that have gone, or students of his, or clients rather, that have worked with him and try to kind of trick this and fake these stories in their active imagination sessions, only to discover that that very active part of the imaginative faculty, once we go seriously to it, once we stop treating it as daydreaming and we start to actually log it, share it with somebody, and really begin to analyze it, that it actually opens up this doorway of communication between ourselves and psyche. I think that the practicing magician sometimes gets diluted with some of the fan fiction that's written in other areas of occultism around these very unique experiences, and forgets the important role of their own mind inside of it. So this is my first recommendation. Get a copy of this, and it'll give you a nice set of tools on how to cultivate active imagination, assist you in dream interpretation, and then begin to ritualize that. So it really sets up the framework for you to kind of really explore more complex ideas or tools of active imagination, such as the Tree of Life and many others. So my second book in that one is a classic one that came to me, by accident once upon a time. It's Outwitting the Devil: The Secret to Freedom and Success by the classic Napoleon Hill. Now, many of you may be familiar of the classic books of Napoleon Hill, such as Think and Grow Rich. Now, according to this book's kind of entry piece, the family of Napoleon Hill didn't want this piece initially published because of the possible tarnishing of his reputation. Yet he attributes the ideas in here to his own success. Whether he's actually having an interview, quote unquote, with the devil is debatable. It is far more likely that he is speaking with his own archetypal devil, or even his own shadow figure. But some of the ideas here is very core and very essential for the magician. And the reason I say that is because when you begin the practice of magic, in fact, when you begin the tools in inner work and you start really opening up to these psychic impressions, you begin that two-way communication, and your spirit, your soul, starts to open up ideas, concepts, things like that. What Napoleon here really explores for us is how a lot of us not acting on that. His metaphorical devil, quote unquote, says that he tricks people from their life force by making them go unconscious. How many times do you catch yourself becoming unconscious, looking at these dreams, these ideas, these things you want to accomplish, without actually taking the necessary action into making them come real? This will give you a lot of interesting psychologies. It'll give you a lot of aha moments where you just discover that aspect of yourself. The next book that I think is a must-have for anybody's library, you can see mine's been, it's seen better days, and that's a copy of Joseph Campbell's classic Hero of a Thousand Faces. If you're a member of the Cult of You, you know that I have a very extensive set of lectures around the work of Joseph Campbell and helping us understand the tarot as well as the progressive journeys through the Tree of Life. Joseph Campbell, for those that aren't familiar with him, Joseph Campbell, for those of you that aren't familiar with him, was a professor of mythology. Essentially, he studied all the great works, everything from the Bible to Romeo and Juliet to the various mythologies to to a number of other bestsellers, and looked to find the existing patterns that match between all of them, and identified a series of these patterns known as the hero's journey. This is a pattern used by filmmakers, music producers, marketers, everybody in the world that really understands how to write compelling and powerful narratives. And these narratives are richly empowering for us because they reflect our own natural journey in life and the stages that we need to go through. Understanding the hero's journey is core to understanding your own personal mythology, and apparently Tony felt a bit threatened by that. But it's experiencing that narrative in ourselves, seeing where we are in it, and then understanding the stages that we need to go through still. This helps us both in improving our own journey, it helps us in telling richer stories, creating more interesting and compelling narratives, and when that is placed in the framework of initiation, suddenly an entire new spectrum opens up. The hero's journey is definitely something that cannot be missed. It should form part of you, and especially if you've looked at the concepts in inner work and you've started exploring active imagination, this also gives you a deep understanding as these mythological components of your own psyche start to reveal itself. It'll provide you a context and a framework by which you can start to self-actualize those ideas into workable concepts. Now, my last book in this piece is Tony Robbins' classic Awaken the Giant Within. And don't worry, I get it. Especially if you're from certain persuasions, you may not have a big appreciation for Tony Robbins. Especially with all that motivational, self-help, larger-than-life kind of feel the passion energy that he comes across with is not everybody's cup of tea. I do get that. But I share this as a caveat doorway for a lot of people, and this is because the real subject that I think is essential, especially to the modern occultist's arsenal, is the skill set of neuro-linguistic programming. NLP was a discipline created by Richard Bandler and John Grinder, where they essentially mapped or modeled some of the greatest thinkers at the time. People like Virginia Satir, the famous family counselor, Milton H. Erickson, pretty much the godfather of hypnosis, and developed so many of these principles by which we can role model and master behaviors and states and things like that. Now, that is quite a complex or large subject to get into, especially if you're new. Tony, however, wraps this up into a nice piece. His reading is very digestible. It's very relevant to specific areas of your life, like your finances, your health, and your relationships, and helps you get these ideas of perception and how your perception is influencing your behavior at a basic neurological level, and gives you tools and ideas. In fact, understanding these tools and ideas and then revisiting some of the classic ceremonies like the lesser banishing ritual, the pentagram, banishing ritual, the hexagram, is suddenly going to open these techniques up to work for you when you get out of the religious paradigm that many occultists still have, and you start looking at what are these things representative of, and how do I change that emotional or neural association. The work that Tony does in this thing is absolutely bar none. He is an innovator in those fields. You may not agree with some of his personal views, and you may have different perspectives of it yourself. You cannot argue with the results. The man has achieved incredible things, and I know that I'm sounding like an advocate of Tony, but that's because I am. You see, when I was going through one of my most mystical orientated stages, in my early stages of occultism, and things kind of became very necromantic and the mad Arab for me, if you will. And I felt like I was losing my mind amid the midst of occult phenomena and experience. This grounded idea back into my own neurology with practical techniques for mastering my emotions, shifting my beliefs and my paradigms, adjusting my communication, fixing my values and my internal principles within myself, which, thanks to Tony Robbins, I was able to understand and then take further in my own life by really deepening into NLP, this was groundwork. You may not like his audiobook of his voice. If that intensity is too much for you, then definitely get a copy of Awaken the Giant Within. It's a great summary of all of his core ideas, and it's really a great bite into NLP with Tony's own personal edition, which is Neural Associative Conditioning. And what I liked about that is how he models all the different therapeutical models, from Gestalt to non-directive, you name it, and he looks at why they work when they work. And if we take those psychologies and we then apply it to our magic, you see, for example, very simple correlations, like how he talks about a therapist making someone imagine that pillow is their father, and the moment they actually associate it is their father, that second it becomes real in their brain and they're in a different emotional state, how that new emotional state gets linked up to this trigger. If we take that paradigm and we expand it to occultism, now suddenly everything from voodoo dolls to puppets to normal sigils in the room and everything now actually becomes practical. It's no longer hearsay on belief or mood or things like that. Works one day and doesn't work another, but it now becomes something you can practically use. So those are my quick starts. So these are base psychologies. Again, they're not your conventional magic books, and they're not necessarily going to learn anything about occultism inside of them. However, by understanding the context inside of these books, you're going to be far more equipped from an inner game point of view to reach new levels in your magic than most of these others that simply get stuck on the grimoires before they've actually done the groundwork. I hope this has been insightful for you, and I hope you enjoyed this. And if you like this type of material or these kind of little reviews, leave me a comment and some feedback of any kind of subjects you'd like me to cover in the future. Till then, remember to live deliciously.